Right or wrong, the idea that the Vietnam War was fundamentally immoral was instilled in me at a very early age. And my political ideals have informed my life choices and my commitment to education as an act of social justice. In my teaching life, I have the great good fortune of looping with my students twice. I have them as sophomores in literature class and then as juniors and seniors in a 2-year international baccalaureate course called Theory of Knowledge, where students are challenged to question what they know and how they know it and look at things from diverse perspectives. I teach my sophomores Tim O'Brien's novel, The Things They Carried, a work of metafiction about the experiences of American soldiers during and after their tours in Vietnam. While students cannot know the author's intention, there are inevitable discussions about O'Brien's opinion on the war. When I have these same students as juniors, we read the chapter in Lies My Teacher Told Me about how the Vietnam War is only marginally covered in American history textbooks. And that leads to rich discussions about why that might be. The lessons are interesting, but they have never felt complete. It is my duty to compel students to look at things from multiple perspectives. I struggled to do this well when I felt I had only a tenuous grasp on the complexity of the Vietnam War. I had to admit that while my students came away from class with a much better understanding of the Vietnam War from an American perspective, they really had no better understanding of it from a Vietnamese perspective, because I had so little information to offer them. My limitations were never more clear to me than when I traveled to Vietnam for my fellowship. More than anything else, recognizing my own bias and having my assumptions challenged led to growth in my teaching. I consider myself to be open-minded, liberal, and curious. And it was good for me to be reminded that no matter how open-minded I believe myself to be, I am still stubbornly informed by preconceived notions and what were revealed to be dogmatic beliefs. It is said that history is written by the victors, and it is true that the official communist doctrine names this historic event the Resistance War against America. However, it is also true that the only time I encountered that phrase while traveling in Vietnam was at the War Remnants Museum, a place that my guide referred to as a temple of communist propaganda. I was more often reminded by the Vietnamese people I encountered and spoke with that the dispute was a civil war before the United States was involved. I'm embarrassed now to admit that because the Vietnam War was so unpopular here, I had forgotten to consider that the Vietnamese people in the South desperately wanted our assistance, formed important attachments to the American soldiers who were stationed there, and were devastated when the United States withdrew troops in 1973. My assumption was that the Vietnamese would have been angry about our presence. In fact, many of them despaired our absence. As an American, I was greeted warmly in both the North and the South. In fact, everywhere I went, Vietnamese people approached me to take pictures with me and of me and touch my stomach. And at one point, I was pulled off the street and into a wedding party because of the pervasive belief that a marriage will be blessed with constant good luck if an American is present at the wedding. Multiple people in Vietnam told me that as a people, they do not look back. They look forward and are hopeful for the future. This is clear when a traveler looks for signs of the war, and there are none. The jungle has reclaimed the military bases, and it is only possible to identify airstrips as the best roads in the very few villages that are laid out on a grid system. My unit of study for my students has changed. I have supplemented my teaching with video clips and photos and blog entries and propaganda posters from my trip. And my students now read The Sorrow of War by Bao Ninh, in addition to The Things They Carried, to analyze the depictions of survivor guilt from a Viet Cong perspective compared to an American one. My student Daisy is writing a paper right now comparing these texts, and she is animated when she talks about the interchangeability of the experiences Ninh and O'Brien describe. In my grant proposal, I intended these changes and others to my unit exploring the Vietnam War, and I will meet those goals. But it's important to note that my fellowship has informed so many other lessons. I'm working to compel my students to face their own assumptions more and more and to consider diverse perspectives. The vast majority of my students are Latino, most of them from Mexico, and this year they are conducting an analysis of the American bias with which travel books on Mexico are written. I've always had my students investigate current events, but now I'm challenging them to find articles on those same events that have been published by the foreign press to look for differences in how they are reported. Further, for summer reading this year, my students will read two books, a piece of American literature and a text in translation that has similar themes, so they can consider the implications of ideas from different global perspectives. The truth is that my teaching has changed because I have changed. Travel is an excellent teacher, and this experience compelled me to question what I know to be true and to reevaluate my socio-political beliefs in a way that I haven't been forced to in a long time. And that, as much as any content knowledge could, has made me a better teacher and my classroom a more fertile place for student growth and learning. For that, I owe a debt of gratitude to Fund for Teachers and the Chicago Foundation for Education. Thank you.